If you are good.
We're in the past year for almost a year and a half, and we're just so glad that he is joining us this evening to share this story. Okay.
Speaking of the mic.
All right. Well, yeah, it is National Poetry Month, so we're glad that you were helping us celebrate that and sharing your poetry tonight. And further ado.
Well, greetings to you who are here and also to you who are joining us online. It's wonderful to have you with us, and it's really wonderful to have you with us also. Thank you. 6 summers ago, I walked the Camino with my graduate school roommate of 40 years earlier. He and his wife and family had done parts of it across the preceding 7 years, but that year, he and I determined to do 800 kilometers, 500 miles, meeting his wife and her old roommate from the same institution for the last 100 kilometers into Santiago. His name is Steve Litch, and I will refer to him, and you will see his picture occasionally throughout this presentation. My spiritual discipline across this 5-week walk was to write a poem a day. Other people keep journals. I did too, but I also wrote my poetry. And I exceeded my one-a-day goal by 26 or 27, depending on what I count. I will not read you all 63, of course, but I am illustrating the 30 I will read with pictures and an occasional video. My intent is to provide a kind of travelogue, of course, and also to share my metered, rhyming observations with you on many things about this pilgrimage. We will start off rather light and airy, and just over halfway through we'll pause for a short intermission, and after that I'll get a bit deeper about what was going on within me as the pilgrimage progressed. You all know, especially since Kristen just said it, that I'm a retired Presbyterian minister, and so matters of faith are important to me. That was true with many people on the Camino, but by no means all. If faith matters are unknown or of no importance to you, understand that you would have lots of good company walking the Camino. Good people of all stripes we found walking there, and it made discussions varied and fascinating. But enough introduction. There is some historical validity to the long-standing tradition that the bones of St. James the Apostle, son of Zebedee, brother to John, one of the sons of thunder, are laid to rest in a silver casket in Santiago Cathedral in the northwest corner of Spain. He is known to have made a trip there during his lifetime, and then his body was reputed to have been brought back there to Santiago by his disciples. In the 800s, these bones were evidently found in a field of stars, hence the name Santiago de Compostela, St. James of the Stars. The Bishop of Santiago in the 9th century saw the potential benefit to his city and region by capitalizing on St. James's bones being in his cathedral, and so for the last 1,200 years, Santiago has been a site of pilgrimage. But unlike Lourdes in France, where people go to get healed of a malady, there is no one reason, either historically or presently, why people go to Santiago. Those who make the trek for religious reasons seem to be out to discover something about themselves and their place in the universe. I went for fun and friendship. But I unexpectedly came back with something more, and I hope that will become clear across the course of this presentation. In Europe, if you're so inclined, you begin your Camino when you walk out your front door, so there is no one path to Santiago. But there is a path 250,000 people a year walk, and that is from southern France in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, whoa, over there, down walkways and roadways over the Pyrenees and across northern Spain, called the Camino Francés, the French Camino. Sorry, I'm losing my pointer here. All the way up to Santiago de Compostela. And that's the path we took. In a sense, my Camino is not over. And I'm sorry, I can't find my, if I could, there we are. In a sense, my Camino is not over because there is a saying prevalent among those who walk with spiritual intent: when the Camino ends, the Camino begins. What that means, I am still working out these 6 years later. Whatever Camino you walk, and whatever country you're in when you begin, there is one greeting you give to others along the way, wherever you encounter them. There are in Spanish 2 good, gracious words that mean good journey, happy trails, walk well. You use them when you see the scallop shell and where you walk past many flocks and herds. You needn't feel that you're among the nerds when you use them where pilgrims walk pell-mell, for they're both wish and greeting when you dwell in northern Spain, which this phrase undergirds. They're spoken with a smile, and we respond, if seated, with a friendly toast of vino. Both great support and joy from far beyond is what is meant by every peregrino. Its repetition casts a friendly bond between all who wish each other buen camino. These words you say to walkers and to bicyclers, but as you can see, whatever mode of transport you choose, you get tired. So my next poem addresses what exactly we were up to. One foot before another takes us to amazing, awesome deeds of daring do. Whoever thought that he or she could walk across a country? Surely that's all talk. And yet, the gentle little steps so plain and unassuming, taken sun or rain, when road through fields creates these countless stills, and then curls winding up between those hills. And you think without thinking, there's no way that you can climb those hills this tiring day. But then a village with its tower of stone comes into view, inviting, all alone. And you know that the tower lords over a square with ancient church and modern cafe there. The thought then fills you with a bit more pep, and you are able to take one more step. And then before you know, you've been refreshed, and you know in Camino you're enmeshed. And on you go to walk up one more hill, for you can do far more than you think still. It's a cliche to say that one can do more than one thinks one can. But still, when one is doing it, it comes as a surprise. I need to tell you of the roads we walked, for they, well marked, determined our caminos. Most common were the country roads we stalked, and many were the other peregrinos. Some paths were old farm roads connecting fields, and some were narrow ways beside the wheat. To all of them, a pilgrim's own self yields. On all of them, each other we would greet. And there were Roman roads, a bit in ruins, and tracks left over from medieval times, and roads paved yesterday for me and Ewans, and some descents and some with awful climbs. Stone bridges we found everywhere, and each round arch had its own tale to tell. No picture can do justice to the care that went into their building oh so well. And vineyards in abundance we passed by, and one remarkable Fuente del Vino. If you had paused to wet your lips so dry, you'd end with verve and joy this good Camino. Of course, we walked through towns too. The novelty never wore off. In Spanish towns, the streets are stone, and they are not so very wide, since they were made ere cars were known. There's precious little room or zone for people walking on the side. Still, you'll find that every bar has tables out upon the street. It doesn't matter that a car intent on going very far zips by just inches from your feet. But these stone streets, so very old, close flanked by houses, garden walls, or tourists, have a special hold, for time itself has been paroled, and these resemble sacred halls. Why did we walk, people ask me, when there are so many other ways of travel? If all we wanted to do was get to Santiago, we could have flown there. Well, the different ways of travel are too numerous to mention. There's walking, of course, that we know for those of us on pension. And there are cars we have to dodge, the friendly drivers wave, and high-speed trains glide silently. About them the Spanish rave. And overhead are aeroplanes upon their rapid flight, and now we walk by this canal that stretches out of sight. The ways of travel far exceed my talent here to rhyme, but best is to see Spain all day, a meter at a time. And that last line I owe to Sam from Houston, seeing Spain a meter at a time. He'd been here many times, but never gotten to know the place so well or so closely. That really was special. There was an intimacy I felt I gained by walking that I would not have felt had I been on a bus trip. Now, let me tell you what the daily routine was like, how each day went. Up before the sun and underway before the stars have totally blinked out above the early morning cars. We walk an hour, maybe two, before a coffee break, and then café con leche and tortilla take the cake. We visit the aseos, and then take the way again. Perhaps we make another stop at 9:30 or 10, and then on into the town ahead we find a place to stay. This is the general pattern when you walk St. James's Way. We try to have a bed all set no later than 1:30, and then we wash and do laundry. We've gotten rather dirty. And then it's time for lunch. And what a joyful meal that is, with the tallest of cervezas, followed by the daily quiz. What was the best about today? What was the very worst? What happened so exciting that it made you want to burst? And then with questions answered and a look at next day's map, it's back to the albergue for an hour-long lovely nap. And then upon arising, do some writing, maybe walk, then get the laundry off the line and have a worthwhile talk, ere stepping out for dinner off the Pilgrim's menu plain, then back to the albergue, and it's off to bed again. I mentioned the word albergue just now. That's a kind of hostel, only you cannot check in before noon or 1 or 2, and you must check out in every case, by 8 o'clock. Well, here's what an albergue is. You'll find albergues are a special place, for they are filled with folks from all around. You never know who might your roommates be, or whether welcome bed be soft or hard. Some come with their own grassy yard, and some with kitchens open helpfully, and all, be warned, will carry too much sound, but all you'll find imbued with special grace. There are albergues almost everywhere along the lengthy pathway of St. James. They provide the peregrino much. And yes, they're run by Spaniards, Germans, Dutch. And if you stay, the albergue stakes its claims, for each is answer to a heartfelt prayer. The albergues also cost, at least in 2017, about 10 euros a night. What did you pay last September? About 10 euros? Yeah. So, and that's about $12.50, or at least was about $12.50, or $12.50. So they're the way to travel when you're a pilgrim. However, you have to be a pilgrim to lodge there. You cannot just drive up and use them as a hotel. And this is how they know, because every pilgrim carries this, a Camino credencial, which one gets stamped at every albergue, church, and cafe along the way. It proves where you've traveled, and you need it at the very end to earn your Compostela. I have a couple of things on the table back in the back of the church, like my Compostela and my backpack and things like that. It's just sort of there for show and tell after the presentation. I don't have a poem, to commemorate this simple folded card. But I keep thinking I should write one, even now. Every stamp brings back a flood of memories to me and to any others who have walked this way. You, with one exception, see smears of ink on a card, right? Every stamp brings back, to me, each speaks of hospitality, generosity, and grace. Each embodies the spirit of the Camino. The Appalachian Trail's a special place, and on it one encounters magic there. Some people make a habit to share grace, which then becomes incarnate of thin air. And so on Santiago's long Camino, reviving like a real copa de vino, the grace of sisters at a hilltop church who let us ring their bell from tower's perch, while down below the pilgrims struggled up to enter this 12th century sacred place. The sisters' welcome and their proffered cup was God's own self receiving face to face the tired, hurting peregrinos who found solace in the church. And quite a queue soon formed to climb the spiral steps of stone to ring the bell and listen to its tone. Did you hear that? Did that come across? I hope you heard it too, joining us at home. People sometimes ask me if I am different after the Camino, if I've changed. I can tell you two trivial ways I have, but in a larger sense, I am not the right person to answer that question. The people I associate with every day and every week would have a much better handle on that. But there are some of the events that are working on me still. Medallions in the pavement all along the city streets, and scallop shells each corner meant we wouldn't miss our beats. The sun behind, windmills ahead. Goodbye, Pamplona city. We found you friendly, warm, and kind, and even sharp and witty. So on we went through fields of wheat up to the very heights. A ridge of windmills powers Spain and brightens up its nights. And there two sacred ways have met across the ages long, the way of wind, the way of stars, immortalized in song. The pilgrim sculpture on the ridge stands stark against the sky. The history of the pilgrimage in iron there on high. But careful be as you descend, for trail is steep and rocky. Humility and care worthwhile, no sense in being cocky. Then through the lovely Uterga. And what a nice cerveza I had with one old chocolate bar upon my outdoor mesa. And Muruzabel I went dry, refilled my camelback, then passed a young Estonian whose life seemed just off track. In Obanos I stopped at church, for it was reaching out. For that Estonian I prayed to help her fight self-doubt. Then on to Puente la Reina, a welcome sight it was, a lunch with Dan the Englishman, a liter beer, because. And then the Pilgrim's Mass in the small chapel by our place. Despair I do of telling you how filled it was with grace. The service was in Spanish, but I knew enough to follow. The singing was deep-throated, full, and none of it was hollow. Then afterwards, the priest pulled us aside for special blessing. We each received a prayer and a small cross to note while dressing. A quiet dinner with tapas and wine then closed the day. Each little happening strengthens us along St. James's Way. Many times, just about every day, I was physically drained. But there were also moments that left me emotionally breathless. We read of El Monumento de los Quedos in our guidebook, but seeing it and reading the sign, which I am doing in this picture, was one of the most moving moments of the whole Camino. The monument itself, as you can see, is a severe, spare, elongated trapezoid, marking the spot where 30 men were murdered between July and December 1936 in the midst of the Spanish Civil War. These 30 graves were discovered in 2011 when the Camino was being widened and improved. The monument struck me in an unexpected way, and for the next several hours I could think of nothing else. I wanted this poem to be blank verse, but the one rhyming word simply would not let me go. We passed a monument today to war. Here 30 graves were found, and there are more. The finding struck the nation to its core, but no one wants this topic to explore. What happened here took place in civil war, too recent to think of as times of yore, but sensitive, so all want to ignore, except the families who the truth implore. So 30 men, an act we all abhor, were murdered here in yet another score for inhumanity. What is in store for we who turn away forget such gore. Please do not let me ever be a bore. But neither must we simply close the door on all that's happened round us heretofore. Oh, do not let this just pass into lore. For contemplation is this walk, for thinking long and deep. The hope is that while doing so, your insight takes a leap. This doesn't happen rapidly. It's not some kind of fix. But when it happens, you will find it's all part of the mix. Insight might be a sudden flash, but it might possibly be some slow dawning that sheds light on who you ought to be. Or insight just might take the form of resting in the glory of being part of God's good plan, a part of God's long story. This last is hard, for we want to make some great mighty splash. We have to guard against an act that really is too rash. For this it takes humility, the realization that in the long sweep of history, we're smaller than a gnat. A gnat, however, who is loved. A gnat with purpose, too. A gnat who just might change the world if your intent is to give God the freedom and the room to change your course and view. We cannot know what lies in store, can't see the path ahead, but insights come when we lead lives devoid of fear and dread. When walking on St. James's Way, there's time for contemplation. I need to take that time at home, at work, in my vocation. And yes, there's time. Remember, you are just a pilgrim on the way that leads to insight, to the glory of a dawn. There was a lot of time for contemplation on this pilgrimage, for we each were alone for a good part of the day, walking, writing in the afternoon or on rest day mornings before we met up for lunch. These times of just thinking amidst the beauty of the Spanish countryside is one of the things that I miss the most. You might be wondering if we ever lost our way. That is possible on some of the Caminos, but not on the Camino Frances, and this is why. I never thought that I would see a yellow arrow as a tree, but I could look at trees all day, and yellow arrows show the way. Without those yellow arrows, we'd be lost in nod, unlike a tree. But trees breathe life and shade and good, and yellow arrows say we should go here or there, or round this bend, or straight on, pilgrim, you're a friend. With yellow arrows, no one's lost, unless, of course, you're really sauced. On country roads or city street, the yellow arrows guide our feet. Thank God that someone armed with paint walked all the way. Oh, what a saint. Now, he has not been canonized, but this is a bust of Don Elias Vallena San Pedro, really the modern-day founder of the Camino. During the Franco years, from the 1930s to 1975, people still walked the Camino, but it was not encouraged. There was little infrastructure in the way of albergues and cafes, and there were very few directional signs. Father San Pedro, armed with cans of yellow paint, took it upon himself to mark the Camino Frances route. Once, about 1981, in the midst of the violence of the Basque independence movement, he was caught painting those arrows deep inside Basque country and with his life on the line, he was challenged as to what he was doing. He looked calmly at his interrogator and said, "I am preparing for the invasion." The good priest died in 1989, late enough to see his words come true. I was writing in excess of a poem a day, but about 2/5 of the way through the trip, my discipline broke down, and this is why. The muse departed yesterday, and for good reason, too. Just 2 kilometers away, I noticed that in lieu of my cork-handled walking poles, I'd grabbed another pair. I thought, behind, a tortured soul's just looking everywhere. So I went back and found Forlorn, a lone, befuddled German. He had delayed his start that morn, just hoping that the vermin who had his poles absconded with might notice and return. I guess his hopes weren't only myth, for when I, in my turn, showed up with all apologies, he smiled and thanked me much. No matter our theologies, his earnest, grateful touch made going back all worth it, though I now was 1 hour back behind my friend who, with the flow, kept going, never slack. Oh, I was so determined to catch up with him, and so I quickened up my pace and flew to overtake my bro. We had agreed, ere parting, that we'd meet at 1 or 2 on the cathedral's steps, where we'd each enjoy a brew. But oh, I moved, never stopping, for I felt so very bad. I flew right by the open door where others breakfast had. Through villages and numerous long stretches in the rain, I wasn't feeling humorous, ignoring every pain. But overtake tall Stevens I could not. At 12:03, I found the great cathedral nigh. I rested gratefully. And I was tired. But the day turned out to be so nice. A joy it was to sit and stay. A deal at any price. We met at 2, as we had said, had lunch out in the sun. Steve said that he was about half dead. Arrived at 1:10. Of course, I had unwittingly passed him when he was inside that open door having breakfast in the small village I just blew through. And our meeting place was Burgos and the great Burgos Cathedral, the largest city on the way, so we missed each other there too until the prearranged hour of our meeting. And then there are the people. Oh, the people that you meet. Why, everyone from everywhere you cannot help but greet. A mother-daughter duo from the city by the bay. Laura taught 8th graders. Daughter Brittany seeks a way. Carmen from La Mancha was so full of verve and spunk. The 3 from down in Georgia just were looking for a hunk. Then there was Dan the Englishman and his 3 friends from home. They had been walking everywhere. They all just loved to roam. Steve and Susan share my name, retired teachers too. And Frank from Albuquerque's been on walks more than a few. Sean is from East London, and he loves the United States. Of course, every other word's profane. Most places he berates. Sam does trades for oil, keeping black the balance sheet. In Spanish, he is fluent, so he'd rather talk than eat. Tom met Tom while on the train, together ever since. Carolyn and Carly, constant joy do they evince. Bright Dora's a deep thinker, Protestant from Hungary. How can we get her to think of career in ministry? Dee's a teacher in New York. She loves those middle schoolers. John from Scotland has no patience with his English rulers. Diane is an Australian, an economics scholar now. And Debbie, who's from Boston's in Connecticut somehow. Georg's come from Austria. He yodeled off the cuff. Dapper does he look, but we are sure he's pretty tough. Brighton gave us Rory, who's adept at the guitar, and Lily's walking with him. She's as bright as any star. Alex and Diego have come here from Mexico, college students with an eye they see beyond the show. Jeanette is here from Germany. She's in the printing biz, and also aunt to Alex, who's an economics whiz. Mark has come from Scotland, and oh boy, does he move fast. Everyone we meet, it seems, is having such a blast. There are all sizes, all the shapes a body might become. There are all ages, each decade, and no one's bothersome. Steve and I plod on along, we stick to our routine, and every day there are new folks with every change of scene. What a privilege to be here, to be a Peregrino. The people are the greatest thing about walking the Camino. We walked with Mike the Jesuit, a priest from Holy Cross. He served the church a good 5 years working for the boss. I mean, of course, the boss in Rome, Il Papa, as they say. Theology and piety brought him St. James's way. Now, what brings Presbyterians and Jesuits together? The belief that God's in everything, the cosmos to a feather. And if we think God's everywhere, then it behooves us to study, learn, and learn some more, to work out what we'll do to understand the world around, the world above, below. And in that way, not just our minds, our spirits too will grow. So we talked on throughout the day, through lunch and then through dinner, and we agreed, of course, that each of us was just a sinner. But God is good and generous, and certainly forgiving. The Camino never stops its course on gracious, worthwhile living. There is a postscript to this friendship. Mike and I stayed in touch, and within 2 years he left Holy Cross to pursue his doctorate at the University of Toronto. There he met and fell in love with a fellow PhD student, Hannah Ferguson. But in order to marry as a Jesuit, Mike had to have in writing the personal permission of the Pope. That permission did not arrive by their planned wedding day. And so I had the privilege of marrying them last August. That permission did come eventually, so now they are married even in the eyes of the Roman Catholic Church. If you ever go, there is one thing besides good hiking boots that is absolutely necessary in the Spanish summer. You put it on as armor against the burning Spanish sun. You put it on your arms and legs and neck and on your tongue. You lather it and sing your songs till all your songs are sung, and then you sweat it off and you are back where you've begun. You struggle up the hillside with your backpack on your back. You've stuffed so much inside, you know there's nothing that you lack, but you perspire so much, you know the sun will you attack. You try to smile, but how long till you crawl into your sack? And then you enter deepest woods, as green can be. No sunlight can get through because of bough and leaf and tree. The air is cooler, you're refreshed, the view is grand to see. Your armor just might last what you applied so desperately. And then you crest the hill, woods stop, and nothing blocks the sun. Why walk downhill when gravity will help you in your run? Your perspiration tells you that your day is nearly done. Then you collapse at a cafe and say, my God, that's fun. Every now and then, we came upon some unusual sights. Out there by the flecha, the garments lay. Was the owner keeping heat stroke at bay? Or were they too heavy? No one can say. But there by the flecha, the garments lay. Long sleeves and long pants and some sneakers too. Perhaps the good wearer had come to rue packing such clothing for a summer stew. Long sleeves and long pants and some sneakers too. Or had the poor pilgrim just laid on down, despairing of reaching the nearby town? Perhaps with a smile or perhaps a frown, that poor Peregrino just laid on down. And perhaps right then his old spirit fled up from its humble and natural bed. His body went too, for he was sure dead right after his spirit had up and fled. Or was this the old witch, once in disguise, who someone doused with water by surprise? She all at once began to vaporize. So much for wicked witches in disguise. So this is a lesson for all who read. Don't pack any more than you know you'll need. And if you're a witch, you'll be dead indeed. You follow this lesson if you can read. Brief intermission and a time for questions. So if anything has stacked up in your mind as something you'd like to ask, now is a good time before we take a few minutes.
Certain date when it starts?
When it starts?
Can you do it whenever you want?
You can do it whenever you want, but there is a winter, even in northern Spain. The most crowded months are May and September because they're considered nice, but not hot. We went from June through July, and it was hot. Everything's in centigrade, of course, in Celsius, but 100-degree temperatures in Fahrenheit, 40 degrees Celsius was normal. That was hot.
There are groups of people going all the time. You don't have to sign up for a group?
Correct, you don't. You can just, Steve and I were a group. We just walked, and then Carol and Nancy joined us in Saria. No, you don't have to go in a group. There are a lot of people. You're never really alone on the Camino. There are people around. I left once at 5 in the morning. Steve was going to leave at 6, and Mike was going to leave at 7. So I got off at 5, and there I am walking through Ponferrada, and I came across a railroad underpass, and there was a small crowd there, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm about to get mugged. What do I know? We're at a railroad underpass, it's dark, the sun isn't up, the sun didn't rise till 7 or so. There were other Peregrinos just standing around talking, so I just waved and ran on. So there's no, people walk all the time. Somebody else had a question.
I didn't know what season you were in.
Yeah.
It was pretty hot.
June and July, oh yeah, it was hot.
So how do you sign up for that card that's got all the stamps on it?
You get that almost anywhere. We got it at the Tourist Information Bureau in Saint John, foot of the mountain, Saint Jean Pied de Port, and they had stacks of them here. Take it, and then everywhere you go, they stamp it. I mean, everywhere you go, you can fill up 3 cards in walking.
So that's the only formal way to do it. There's no formal way to do that. It's informal.
Yeah. Although when you apply for your credencial, for your Compostela, they want to see that. They flip through it to make sure you.
So, and for accommodations along the way, they just.
First come, first served. And
This is almost out tonight because I'm tired now.
Say again?
I'm tired now, so this is almost out tonight.
Yes, in fact, our daily routine, I'm sorry, I should be repeating the questions for you all at home, I apologize. The question was, do you have to make reservations ahead of time? You can. Once Carol and Nancy joined us, Steve made reservations because, Steve spoke Spanish, because with the two women, with his wife and her friend, we didn't want to be just without a place. Although when we were walking alone for the first 700 kilometers, we never had trouble staying, except in one place. There was the albergue we went to was full because, in the words of the woman, the hospitalero at the albergue, the hippie convention was in town. I don't know what she meant, but there were a lot of people of a looser lifestyle who were filling the town, and they would fill that albergue. But she called us up. She called up another one, sent us up to another albergue, and the 2 of us and 1 other person were the only people in that albergue. So that obviously wasn't a problem. So we never really had a problem anywhere. And we always tried to be in by 1 because it's hotter in the afternoon, and that's when we would nap or do laundry, things like that. Did the albergues serve food too? Sometimes they did, and when a dinner was always kind of a big affair and fun, but not every albergue did. Some did, and that was great. Long tables, and we're all sitting, and conversations in multi languages with different people translating. That was kind of fun and weird. They all said that they served breakfast also, but often that was a piece of toast or something like that. We always stopped for breakfast an hour down the road because what we got at the albergue was never enough to start us for the day. And then when we stopped for an albergue, stopped for breakfast, café con leche is coffee with cream. Yeah, coffee with milk. And a tortilla, you know what a tortilla is, but in Spain it's different. It's like a thick potato pie. And a piece of that and a café con leche was fine. That was it. we were set for the rest of the morning. So no, we did not starve at all. Also, dinners were interesting too, because every town you went to, different restaurants, different bars, restaurants, everything was called a bar, served a pilgrim's menu, and that cost 10 euros. Did you find that? 10 euros, and it was always the same. There were about 4 meals. There was fish, pork, beef, or chicken, or something like that, right? And so you pick one, and that 10 euros included, well, the meal and a carafe of wine and a dessert. I mean, that was fine to me. We had friends who walked the Camino the year before us, and they told us to avoid the pilgrim's menu. My advice to you, if you walk it, is to embrace the pilgrim's menu. It's terrific. It's food. It's perfectly good. And it is kind of boring because it's really the same thing, but it's delicious. They do a good job. So let's see. I wrote some questions for you to ask me. What was your best day on the way? There was a 37-way tie for that honor. It took us 37 days to hike the Camino. I can't remember his name now, but about a month ago, a writer wrote in the New York Times about his walk on the Camino. And he took his 19-year-old son with him. And as they walked into Santiago, the 19-year-old looked at his father, and he wrote this down, said, "Dad, that is the first 10 out of 10 experience I've ever had." And that was true for me too. There wasn't a bad day. I kept telling Steve the novelty hasn't worn off. What was your worst day? There really wasn't a day that was bad. There really wasn't a bad day, but there was one night that was uncomfortable. It was sleeping on a pad in the loft of an albergue, and the space that I had to myself was that wide, and over here was another person, and over here was another person, and it was stuffy, and it was crowded, and it was difficult. And again, picture people lying basically right next to you, and try to get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. That was an uncomfortable night, but that was the only one of like that. Other times, we were in a bunk room, but it had beds and all of that. Was it safe? Yes, but it's a good idea. Always, you'll see back there my waterproof bags. I always had a waterproof bag that I put my passport and my wallet and any other. I didn't have any other valuables. I guess my phone. Put passport, wallet, phone all in this waterproof bag and would take that into the shower with me, because albergues are extremely public places. The bathrooms are public. I mean, what separated you from another person was the stall wall. All right, and there you're in either the toilet or the shower by yourself, but you walk out the stall and there's everybody else there too. So you wanted to make sure that you kept your valuables with you. That was just prudence. So it's safe. But Dora did lose about 70 euros, and somebody took it from her backpack while she was in the shower. So would you do it again? In a heartbeat. Where are we in time? Oh, have about 15 more minutes. So if you can tolerate another half of the 15 minutes of the spiel. Spain is, of course, historically a Catholic country, and so every village, town, and hamlet has at least one parish church, usually more. Each one of them is an artistic treasure. So even if you have no religion whatsoever, they are worth stopping in as you pass by. The plenitude of churches got me thinking. The houses of the faithful dot the landscape everywhere. While most have candles burning still, a few need some repair. They all are testaments to Christ, to his capacity to encompass human suffering and treat it differently. The crucifix has central place, and it's a great reminder that suffering's the human lot, but God's a whole lot kinder. God's kinder because all the bad that humans e'er have done was taken on by the divine, by the one and only one. Some superstition has crept in, misunderstanding too, but the message of the cross is this: God knows us through and through, and God is love despite it all. God loves us even so, and that should make us humble from our head down to our toe. I welcome these stone houses which I come upon each day. They're not like yellow arrows, but they do show me the way. Peregrinos, pilgrims, provide the economic lifeblood of many of the small towns through which we traveled, and local churches also cater to that crowd with evening masses, usually every day, followed often by special pilgrim blessings, as you've heard about already. It was during one such mass early in the pilgrimage that I found myself wondering what I, a good Presbyterian, was doing in these Roman Catholic masses. I mean, there's an enormous difference between these two denominations. I mean, that's what the Reformation was all about 500 years ago. So I began to compose this while I was sitting there. Why do I worship when I do not know the tongue? When everyone's reciting, both the old and, yes, the young? Why do I worship when I have to disagree with all the rites and rituals of this theology? Why do I worship in a place where Christ has been worshipped for at least half the time since taking on our sin? I worship to show honor to the parent of my faith. I worship to say thanks to one so skilled with plane and lathe. I worship because in this way I'm telling God that I'm not too darn busy to drop in and give to God my time. I worship because I'm attached to something bigger than all the disagreements that divide the human clan. I worship because I can see hope for the human race when all these nationalities now gather in this place. I worship because in these tongues so obvious around, we are a small community that would the world astound. So even when my life is such that I can't understand, I still will worship, because God is bigger than a brand. Steve and I were in churches several times a day, but those visits were not without cost, and I do not mean monetary cost. Upon leaving one, I spoke directly to God. Once again you overwhelm me. Once again I am in awe. From the 12th, 11th century you bear emotions raw. In the grand stone-vaulted churches with the priceless artwork there, I don't need the sacred searches to discover a sculpted prayer. What are you doing to me? Why do you speak this way? Is there something you want through me? Is there something I should say? Am I supposed to catch a hint? Am I supposed to learn? You want me somewhere do a stint? You want me do a turn? I can feel your power in me. I can feel your spirit true. Is there grace to flower in me? Must I prove that I'm with you? Why am I overwhelmed each day when I go in a church? Why do I feel I never may succeed upon my perch? Do you want I make a major change? Must I embark upon a new endeavor I'll find strange, a brand new marathon? And then the answer came to me, in church and through a friend. I need not alter completely. I need not bring an end to all I've known in this life's shift, to all I am right now. I simply might enjoy the gift. I might enjoy the thou in my relationship with God. My life is Peregrino. Even though through all the days I plod, I'll still be on Camino. what really is important on a true long-distance hike. It's not the weather or the clothes or people that you like. It's not the country you pass through, though that's important too. It's the attitude with which you walk. It's what you're out to do. If you're intent on conquering, then conquer it you will, until there are no more challenges or you are over the hill. If you are out to prove something and want to get someone to sit up and take notice, then you've lost ere you've begun. And if you think you've lost your way, and this will do the trick, perhaps even this long-distance hike will finish much too quick. But if you want to tie yourself into the land and trail and redefine inside your mind the words succeed and fail, and if you do not mind at all the constant vagaries that any major hike will bring in twos, sometimes in threes, then just perhaps you have a call to hike beyond your ken, to hike beyond your comfort zone, to see what happens when you let all go, you open up, you just accept what comes. You're grateful for a royal meal or for a few breadcrumbs. If you don't care whom you might meet, but anyone you see is welcome and refreshing for the moment's company, then you are on the deepest path, where'er that path may lead, which helps you know yourself much more, and maybe something heed. Something heed that's speaking to you from your heart, allow me from your soul, and telling you that just ahead you have another goal. You have a purpose, heretofore not understood or sought, a purpose only you can fill, and it cannot be bought. So walk the PCT, or the AT, or the Camino. Remember at the end of it, you're still a peregrino. And what you do is important, whether work or avocation. Keep at the process to find out what gives you motivation. And if you happen to be one who prays just now and then, that's not a bad beginning ere you say your last amen. If prayer is something foreign, then be not at all dismayed. There's purpose still within you now, a purpose for you made. Beyond a simple prudence, just let go the world's concerns and work out how the universe is cockeyed as it turns. Then using love and charity, which you learned on your hike, work to correct the problem, put a finger in the dike. If you can do one little thing to make the whole world better, then you have saved humanity, and I to you am debtor. Humility is what you learn on one long-distance hike. Let not the lesson drop away. Please teach it to your tyke, and then you might be able to acknowledge frankly that there's more than we can see and know. Stop straining at a gnat. Let goodness wash all over you. Remember love, compassion. Whatever happens all around, keep those two as your passion. Accept all comers. Accept those who need a word from you, and uplift others every day. Then rest when you are through. You may not e'er be famous, and you may not roll in dough, but you'll have satisfaction, which you'll find will grow and grow. You may not e'er have everything you'll ever want or need, but you'll have peace the world can't give, and that's a gift indeed. Thanks to many friends on Facebook and from the Middlebury Congregational Church, I was able to raise a little monetary gift for the Open Door Clinic in Middlebury. People of that congregation and Facebook friends pledged anywhere from a penny to 50 cents a kilometer so that as I walked each day, I was aware that I was raising about $7 for the Open Door Clinic for every kilometer I walked. About 10 days from the end, we passed the Cruz de Ferro, the Iron Cross, a modest symbol on a very tall pole situated at the highest point of the Camino Frances, elevation about 5,000 feet. It became custom ages ago to put a stone at the cross's base, and now the pile of stones, as you can see, is enormous.
With gratitude to all of those I'm sorry. And I offer prayers of concern for all those who need. Let's start again. With gratitude to all of those who are supporting the Open Door Clinic, and I offer prayers of concern for all those who need the Open Door Clinic. That was prayers of concern for all those who need the Open Door Clinic.
Today was the agent for a miracle. I placed 2 stones at Cruz de Ferro's mighty base. 2 friends at church had given me the rounded stones. It was my privilege to lay them in this place. And there I offered prayers of gratitude to those who freely pledged so much support to keep the welcome at the Open Door, the clinic many find a last resort. And there I prayed for everyone who needs the clinic Open Door, for men and women, children too, who work, but still are very poor. I stopped to dry my eyes and went on down the hill. What God permitted me is working on me still. How much there is for us to do. Let's take the chance and see it through. Thank God I walked more than I talked. I was taught more than 20 years ago to participate, not anticipate. But it is a lesson I have to keep learning daily. Participate, the wise of old said once upon a time. You spoil if you anticipate, and herein lies my rhyme. I saw a village to the left, and oh, it was so far, and I was circling round, it seemed. I wanted to go there. But I kept on the narrow track that I had chosen earlier. I tried to stay upbeat, for I don't want to be a worrier. The sign said 1 kilometer. How could it be so near? My eyes had told me it was far. I almost gave a sneer. And then I rounded o'er a hill. And there, just right below, I saw the town I really sought. I hadn't far to go. Oh, stupid me, I thought again. Please listen to the ages. Tim DeRocher spoke the truth. He's one of God's great sages. The town that I had seen off left was way far off our track. My village was much cuter and a place to drop my pack. Participate and walk the path. Let the surprises come. Don't let yourself anticipate. You'll end up feeling numb. So once again, I learned the truth that I had known before. Just take each moment as it comes, for God knows what's in store. I began to wonder, too, if there was something primeval in what I was feeling. I hearkened back to the 2010 movie called The Way by Emilio Estevez, starring his father, Martin Sheen. It's about a young man who dies on the Camino, and his father goes to collect his body, but instead takes his son's ashes on the Camino himself. If you have seen it, you will remember the scene at the gypsy party when the father of the boy who stole the backpack tells the protagonist how he must end his Camino. When Ishmael said to Tom, religion's not the reason he had to go to Mushia, no matter what the season, he was implying that there's something deeper than the doctrines of a faith within the human plan. Some sense original within our DNA, religion tries to capture, to put this sense in play. What is it in our psyche that wants expression so? I'd tell you, of course, if I knew, so you might also know. But this, I think, there's much more to all the world around than what our senses tell us, than what so far we've found. So be not satisfied, I say to friend and foe, with what you now are thinking, with just the status quo, and open up your spirit to what you think is dubious, for round us and within us, the truth we'll find is beauteous. I have spoken of the plenitude of churches, but there were also a whole lot of rest stops. Some were natural fountains. Some were essentially tourist traps, but tourist traps selling handmade articles. Many were cars drawn up where the path crossed a road, and the vendor would be selling drinks and fruit and candy out of the back of his vehicle. And in one place, at the border of Rioja, a lovely woman was giving out free samples of Rioja wine. But since she was helping her daughter through school, we each gave her €1. But then there was the king of rest stops. Way high above Astorga town, the track is gravel, fields are brown. A spot has won deserved renown for raising spirits so far down. David holds sway. It is his place. It's filled with fruit and juice and grace. There are even shaded pads in case you need to rest to break your pace. He gives this freely. Don't try to return to him what is his due. Pay it forward, so a few more people will feel thanks anew. Where'd you get this thought, I said. Whatever put it in your head? To someone new he held out bread. It's God's idea, and off he sped. Now that was an example of faith in action. Late in the pilgrimage, after many churches and fountains and rest stops and cafes and albergues, I learned another dimension of faith, one I had spoken of and even practiced occasionally, but as with so many other theological truths, I came to appreciate and understand this in a deeper way. A new dimension I found out today. A small stone village church just off the way invited passers-by come in to pray. I wended through the crowd to kneel and stay. And as I knelt, no words came to my mind, soft music played and murmuring behind, but I was in a silence of a kind I had not known before. Have I been blind, a sort of intellectual not knowing what God has all too obviously been showing, that my frenetic pace might need some slowing? Perhaps even now my faith just might be growing. What value might be in simple silence? I want to speak to God. Have I been dense? What if God speaks to me to make some sense of inchoate longings? I shall go hence and practice mental silence when I pray. God knows what's on my mind, of course, anyway. But silence takes some time. I must not stray from practicing this practice every day. So witness to your faith when you are home. The priest closed Pilgrim's Mass with just this thought. We had but 3 more days, cross Spain to Rome. How might we practice well all that we ought? I've written earlier while on this trip of contemplation, silence, and of awe. I know that in the future I will slip. The good priest's words have oped a sore so raw. I slip more than I walk, it seems to me. And I am one great mass of work undone. Does my desire in God's good alchemy to please our God bring honor to the Son? Or do my slips negate all that I try? And do I try too little for my call? See, when at last it is my turn to die, I know I'll hear, you did not try your all. Is there a second chance when this life's o'er? Can we make good in all we did not do? Can we correct what left another sore? No. We must live with all we left askew. Yet even then, I don't think God is done with us for whom he died, for God is love. And in God's love we trust, because God is one. And that's one witness to our God above. I cannot draw this presentation to a close without mentioning the one possibly very holy item which I encountered. It was in Lyon, a city named for the Roman 7th Legion, which was stationed there 2,000 years ago. This is the cathedral in Lyon, a beautiful building with positively stunning stained glass windows, but it was falling down in the 19th century and almost completely rebuilt 150 years ago. The artifact was not in the cathedral. This is the church of San Isidoro, built in the 11th century, although only the cloister remains from that time. The doorway in the center of the picture is the Puerta del Perdón, the door of pardon, where medieval pilgrims too ill to travel on to Santiago could nevertheless receive full indulgences. No less than 11 kings, 12 queens, and 23 princes are buried within those walls. But the artifact was not in the church of San Isidoro. Attached to this basilica, just off to the left of the picture, is the museum. And in that museum, all alone, in the oldest part of the building, yes, there it was, a chalice in an ancient vaulted room. No other gem or artifact competed in the gloom. The case was lit. We crowded round. Its history we heard. No undue claims were made about it. No statements were absurd. But this cup can be traced right back 1,000 years in Spain, when it was asked from Egypt as a payment for some grain the Leon king had given in a time of famine there. And Egypt's caliph thought it fine, that ancient cup, to share. Now, Egypt's records go way back. It seems it got it from the Holy Land, Jerusalem, a 2nd century plum. And there the trail evaporates, no further back we go. But that's within 100 years of the supper that we know. No claim it has is hard and fast, but there is a chance that I, upon the cup that Jesus shared, actually did spy. Now I have to give you the full story, and I could not do that in verse. The cup, as it came to Spain 1,000 years ago, consisted of the bowl and the top, which is down here, just a clay bowl with a top. You can put your hand around the stem easily. It's like a large wine goblet. But the princess of 1,000 years ago, they got it from Egypt. They bought it from Egypt figuring it was the Holy Grail, and that was its reputation back then. And when they got what this princess said, this is the Holy Grail. It's just a clay cup. We've got to make it look better. So she's the one who took the top off, put it underneath, added the gold and silver stem, and encrusted it with jewels all around, and said, now that's the Holy Grail. So it's only looked like that for the last 1,000 years. For the 1,000 years before that, it was just the clay cup. There are evidently about 10 cups in the world, 10 chalices, 10 cups in the world that have some basic, possible claim to be the Holy Grail. This is one of the 10. By the way, you cannot take a picture of it. This is a picture of a postcard. Mike lingered in the room a bit so that he could get a picture, but the guide who had taken everybody else into the next room came back and caught him. and so he shamefacedly had to come along with the rest of the group. Our pilgrimage ended in the autonomous region of Galicia, north of Portugal, separated from the rest of Spain by a high mountain range. The weather coming in from the Atlantic, therefore, drops its moisture before it is forced up the hills, making Galicia very different from the land we had just walked through. And it is pronounced Galicia because in the late 16th century, King Philip II lisped. And when the king lisps, everybody lisps. Galicia is a Celtic land. That's hard for folks to understand. Its gentle hills and dales are green, and pasture lands make up the scene. Well, there are mighty forests, too, and dovecotes where the pigeons coo, and Spanish X's instead of J's and octopus on tapas trays. The people have a different tongue, a language to which they have clung. Gallego makes this Welsh heart beat whene'er I hear it on the street. A rugged coast like down East Maine keeps all Galicians sound and sane. The old end of the world is there at isolated Finisterre. The capital of this fine place is Santiago, full of grace. It's there this pilgrimage will end with many adventures, many a friend. It is inevitable, of course, that when you walk far enough, eventually you come to your destination. I stood by myself on the Mount of Joy. Far be it from me to be cute or coy, for friends and others were with me there, glimpsing the spires o'er Cathedral Square. But tears unbidden came to my eyes as I gazed upon the distant prize. 500 miles lay behind. I struggled to grasp this with my mind. Silence came over me there and then, a silence beyond my will or ken. No words came to me, no thoughts were clear. I knew then only to revere. Some good long moments. Then down the hill and into the city's crowd, noise, and thrill, until along a cobbled street with tired body and aching feet, the cathedral spires loomed ahead. There were still some streets we had to tread, but then we rounded into the square, and my pilgrimage began right there. So let it be. Now you're supposed to applaud madly and say, that was a great, great thing, okay? Thank you for all that applause. I do have a curtain call. The Cathedral of St. James. I've been calling it Santiago Cathedral, but it's the Santiago Cathedral. Cathedral of St. James was being completely redone. That's the western front. And so that's all I saw of it. Subsequent friends and pilgrims, of course, have seen it unscaffolded. Inside, you may have seen this, and you may know this if any Episcopal or Catholic churches you've been to, where the priest walks up with a incense. What were you going to say? A censer, yes. Now, in Spanish, that's called a butafumero. And the butafumero in Santiago Cathedral is a wee bit large. I am standing in the transept of the cathedral. A Gothic cathedral is shaped like a cross, and I'm in one of the arms. And this is the butafumero being used. It is scattering incense around the cathedral, and of course that makes sense because it looks like it looks mysterious, and it goes up in the air and is taking our prayers up into the sky. All of this is a good thing. But think what it's also doing when you've got a cathedral full of pilgrims who've just come off the pilgrimage. The incense casts a much nicer smell through the whole area. And so this is what I got to witness. Can you hear that? So that was just to be, just so you could see what goes on in Santiago. That does not happen every Mass. That was the feast day of St. James, and so that's why they did it then. Well, thank you all for being here. Blessings. There's some show and tell on the back table. Thank you all for joining us from online, and I'll be glad to talk with anybody who wishes at this point. I beg pardon?
How long do they think, how many years did scaffolding?
About 2 years. And it's long gone. Like, I've got pictures of it looking much nicer than other fences. Should have used that. I didn't think of that. No, too late.